Hi, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Clouds, Edge to Edge Transformation. And speaking of transformation, it is really important to look at not only how startups, big companies, but also how social causes are making a difference in our lives and how they're changing with changing technologies. And one of the people I got to know way back right after 9/11 was Anand Deshpande. He and his co founder were visiting us in Silicon Valley. Although we never ended up doing any business together, I followed his trajectory not only in technology, but also in supporting many causes. Anand, tell us, how did you become the Anand I know today?
Thanks for inviting me. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here at this event. Just to give you a little bit of a personal background, I grew up in Bhopal. My father, he worked for Bharat Heavy Electricals, and I grew up in the BHEL township. And I went to school in Bhopal, in Campion School, Bhopal. And I did all my schooling pretty much till 11th in Bhopal. And after completing 11th higher secondary in Bhopal, I went to Kharagpur. And I spent 5 years in Kharagpur. I graduated with a computer science degree. My batch was the third computer science batch in from IIT Kharagpur. That was in '84. And then I came over to the US, like everyone else in our classes, I guess. And we ended up at different places. I was at Indiana University, Bloomington. I did a PhD in computer science, mainly in the database area. I graduated from there in 1989. And then I did a short stint in the US in the Hewlett Packard Laboratories in Palo Alto. I worked there for 18 months as a research member of the technical staff in the research labs. And after 18 months or so, where I was on a practical training visa that we had for my J1 visa, I decided not to file the H1 and all that and just went back to India with a very limited plan that, there was things happening in India and I thought I should live back in India. So I came back to India in 1990, started Persistent. It's been 33 years. In the last 33 years, I've been part of Persistent. We started early and things were very different in 1990. People who know India know that India was a pretty difficult place to live, operate. Facilities, technology was kind of very primitive. Sometimes you do what you have to do. I must say I've been very fortunate to have been part of an amazing journey that I've seen as part of the Indian IT businesses in some sense. When I started out, the total IT export business from India would have been less than $50 million. Today, it's nearly $250 billion. So, the last 33 years, I've really seen a dramatic revolution of some sort in terms of how the technology related IT business has transformed India in many different ways. Today, the Indian IT industry contributes almost, a very significant part of our total exports, almost, into nearly 20% or so. And there is a very good percentage of the economy that depends on the IT and technology industry. So I've been very fortunate to have been part of this journey. It's been a good run.
It must have taken tremendous amount of courage because you went in the pre-internet days where you really had
Yes.
to develop a team and work remotely. Email started in the mid 90s.
We had a facility to move data, but it was very primitive. We had a sort of an data exchange station, one PC in the corner, which would do this. Every morning we would download files, and every evening we would upload those files for our US customers. We have a nice window where we work at the nights for the US, and it would take us about 5 minutes to upload or download 30 kilobytes. Okay, so it was a very, very slow connection. And the thing was, it would drop frequently. So we used to use a set of Unix utilities to take the code, compress it, tar, zip, char, all that stuff, and move it in the morning and move back in the evening. So it was very primitive. Phone calls were also very expensive. And one interesting story I share with people is that one of my point of presence was at NCST in Mumbai. So NCST used to be one of the major ERNet nodes, as they called it. So that was the Indian version of the academic internet. When US had all these ARPANET and all that. So we were on the ERNet is what it was called. And NCST, which was headed by Dr. S. Ramani, they gave me an email address. And I had a 9600 baud modem, which was what those people were using. And I would dial into Mumbai to check my email. And in India at that point, we had this system where we would have a pulse rate. So after every pulse rate, one call would get deducted. So Mumbai was about 3 minutes. Every 3 minutes, you have to pay for one more call. So you count calls in terms of the number of calls you have to make. And every call pay price is what depends. If you're using few calls, then the price was lower. And instead of using more and more of the telephone bill, then the price would go up. So it was actually cheaper for me to go to Mumbai to check mail than dial in and check mail. I used to have a second class pass. So Mumbai Pune, we are 192 kilometers away. Pune at that time, trains were the only way real to go because road was very unreliable. It would take 7 hours. Train you would go in 3.5 hours. The only train really worth taking was Deccan Queen. And Deccan Queen used to reservations were very hard to get. But if you had a pass, then you could board the train. So I would get a second class pass, 170 rupees per month. Right? So 170 rupees, you can go every day if you want. So it was very cheap. So every Thursday when we had our weekly off, I would go to Mumbai, check all my mail and come back. And it was much cheaper to do that than actually dial in. So, India in the early, before the liberalization of the 91 transformation was a very different place.
Very true. In fact, I remember those days when education for you and me at IIT was almost free, and
Yes.
we had all these amenities. And you talk extensively about gratitude. What are the things you are grateful for in your life that contributed to your success?
Mhm. Actually, too many things, right? But if you count it, I grew up in a very safe family. My family was all professionals mostly. My father was an engineer, he was working in a professional company. We grew up in a township. So it was very protected and very safe in that sense. And it was quite intense. The entire township was people like my father, and kids were pretty intensely watched. Uh, getting good grades in exams was like the requirement, and everybody worked. Homework was sacrosanct, and everybody did all those things. But those were good discipline, good, nice discipline, safe environment. All that was good when I was growing up in school. And IIT was again a great thing for all of us. I think many of us would consider ourselves very lucky for us to get in. But once we got in, it changed our lives in many different ways. It got us completely different perspectives. It got us many opportunities that we would not have seen for being anywhere else. So, and also the camaraderie and the friends we made while we were in IIT was actually quite amazing. And, it was a great doorway to the future in some sense. And that was nice. At Indiana, it was very different. I really became far more responsible about technology solutions, whatever I was doing. At IIT, until then, we were just following the path. Everybody was together and everyone did homework, we did homework. So it was not really thought through. But when you come to grad school and you're in a PhD program, then you're pretty much on your own. So you have to hack your way alone. And that was a good learning experience. So yeah, meaning my early years were very formative. My family has been very supportive. I got married in 1990. Wife and kids have been extremely supportive. So some basic things in life that make it possible for entrepreneurs to take chances. Entrepreneurship is quite brutal. You get into all kinds of stress situations, and every day you have to deal with all kinds of complexity. But when you have supportive family members, that makes this very viable. Otherwise, it is impossible to just kind of try to be an entrepreneur. And I'm very grateful to my family, wife, kids, parents, and everyone else for having been so supportive of it.
Clearly, you see persistence as an important value for people doing startups or being professionally successful. How would you rate persistence compared to other values when it comes to doing anything in life? And why did
Hmm.
you name your company Persistent Systems?
Well, I named the company Persistent Systems because I was a database guy, as I mentioned to you. I did a database PhD. And when I was looking to work and all that, my network was in the data areas. And when you talk about systems that are persistent, it's very clear what kind of systems we are working on. So it was a technical term in that sense, right? But once I named the company Persistent, it was a value as well, right? So that makes it very, I mean, it's a very nice thing to talk about because one is you're persistent by name, you're persistent by reference, and persistent by value, as we say. So it helped a lot. And why is persistence important? And there is a very nice quote by one of the US presidents about how the importance of persistence, because he mentions that there are lots of people who do various things, but press on, being persistent is really what makes a difference. And what I find, and something that I tell everyone as well, is that see, the difference between those who succeed and those who don't are those who come back the next day. Meaning all of us run into issues. If you look at athletes, that's a good place to look at. If you go to any athlete who wins finally on a podium, there may be many finishes where they never finished anywhere near the podium. And many people who feel rejected by that actually don't come back the next day. But those who keep coming back are eventually the ones who make it. So even in business, I'm sure you have experienced this all the time, that we run into many disappointing situations, employees leaving, to customers saying no, to new customers not coming through. And how you handle those depends on how you come back. And that has been really very important for us. Since you asked about other things, one of the things that I've been so very clear about is ethical practices and the importance of that. Now, being where I am in India, there's a lot of suspicion and other things about how people might be doing things that are unethical. There's a lot of talk about corruption and all that. So one of the ideas was that, can we do a business that is clean and doesn't get involved in any of these things? So I feel pretty proud of the fact that we've been able to run a business which is very clean. We take these things very seriously, and we've been able to run a business where it is very important. And it's been good. And again, how you promise what you promise to people and how you deliver is all these things come into play.
Anand, you and I met soon after 9/11 at a time when many companies were, talk about persistence. We almost went under with the dot-com crash and 9/11, and we were
Correct.
barely surviving. And we ended up never doing business together. But you somehow have the knack of staying in touch with people, which I truly admire. How do you possibly stay in touch with thousands of people?
So I'll tell you my early days situation, which is more interesting. So I used to maintain, like all of us, probably a phone book, a physical diary in which you wrote phone numbers down. And I had a US diary, which had only US phone numbers. So anybody you met could write the phone number down in a diary. And at that point, phone calls were, people would take phone calls, you could leave voicemails. That was the method, right? I would have to wait in lobbies and in airports and all these places all the time. So I used to play this diary flipping game. So I would just open the diary into one page, pick up a guy and just call him, okay, and leave a message. More often than not, people would not pick up or whatever, but that didn't matter really. I mean, I wasn't trying to, whatever conversation happened was great, but the fact is, if you want people to think about you, let's just say things like, I would leave it in a way that there was no way for them to get back to me also, because I was calling from an airport, and we were pre-cell phone days and all that. People didn't have a way to call back. And yeah, when you would say, hey, I was traveling, I was at the airport, I thought of you, because we would call. Um, I know maybe hard for you to reach me, but I'm always available on email, and I would hang up because that's what happened. Right? But that helps, right? These kinds of things. I've also written to a lot of people on email, and I do that very regularly as well. That saying, hey, hi, I haven't seen you in a while. Just wanted to stay on the top of your stack in some sense and send messages like that. I use it quite regularly to try to look at what people are up to and then respond to that. I like meeting friends. I mean, it's so much fun to meet people and hang out with them. I very strongly believe that people you waste time with are people you remember the best. I don't feel it bad to waste time with people. I feel bad when I'm wasting time with myself. But if I have someone else with me and we happen to just sit and, as you say, bullshit, have chai, those are all very nice things to do. And those are the things you remember most, is what I've seen.
So you kept up the tradition of those chat sessions, or we call them CAC sessions, during
Yeah,
undergrad
we used to
days.
call them art sessions in India investment. Right? So yeah, but they're same idea. I've done this many times, and I ask everyone to think about it, and especially in what I'm doing right now, I definitely tell people to think through this. Just think of now we've been all out of college for more than 35, 40 years. Now I'm out of college for 40 years. And if I think about who are my best friends and why do I remember them, more often than not, it's those who I wasted time with in college are my best friends. Those who were, just acquaintances who were in class who were just doing assignments together. I hardly remember those people, or they are not in touch with me. But people I wasted time with, they continue to be very good friends. So I really believe that when you look at further along, not necessarily immediately, you go past transactions to relationships. It's these seemingly trivial things. That is what builds these relationships. Very formal, pointed conversations are very transactional, and you don't remember them. But these wasted times are always good fun.
Once I was telling somebody, he said, "You're good at casual conversations." I said, "There is no such thing as a casual conversation because therein the person gets revealed because you're not on guard. You're not trying to make a quick
Yeah,
buck. And that's when the true person emerges, isn't it? When there is no agenda
absolutely.
per
And
se.
when there is no vested
There's
objective, not every meeting has to be a sales meeting, and sales happen even in casual conversation. I always enjoy hanging out with people and meeting people. And I do this all the time. Even now, when I'm in a new city, I will always look my LinkedIn and look for people in that city and maybe write to them, depending on how things go, try to meet them as well.
by all conventional measures, you've achieved your dreams and done all the things you probably wanted to do. I still see you staying up at night and getting up early in the morning. What keeps you up at night? What are the causes that you think about, worry about at this stage in your life?
Let me give you a little bit of what's going on and where I am right now, what I'm doing. So I started Persistent in 1990. 4 years back in 2019, I decided to move off my CEO job. I'd been at it for almost 30 years, and I said, yeah, I could keep doing this for another five, but I didn't see it continuing for too much beyond that. There was also a lot of pressure in India about trying to separate the CEO job from the chairman job. So I was being forced to take a call, either be a chairman or CEO. And I figured it may be a good time to transition out of the CEO job. So one of the things I decided is that if I'm not CEO, must do something else because I couldn't be doing nothing. So I decided to look at sort of a longer term view and say that instead of trying to find how do I keep myself busy for 3, 4, 5 years, can I look at activities and things that can last like 25, 30 years? So what are those projects and problems where I could get interested in them and which should be impactful and little longer term. So that's sort of my motivation for what I'm trying to think about right now. And I'm broadly working in three broad areas. Okay, one is around entrepreneurship. The second is around data, and the third is around continuing education. And I'll explain a little bit about why these three and what is the motivation behind. I'm sitting in India right now, and I live here, and I'm familiar with the demographics here. And I feel that having lived a career here, I should look at what are the most important problems that are local in my neighborhood. And I realized that if you look at India and you look at many problems, a lot of those problems would get sorted out if people had good regular monthly income and they need jobs to make things happen. Because you want education, you look at healthcare, all these problems will get addressed if people have the ability to pay for them. So that's sort of the hypothesis. And the reality in India is that we have about 700 million people, half the population, typically less than 35 years old. So any which way you look at it, we have like 25 to 30 million people at every age in India, below the age of 35. So we need about 18 to 20 million jobs every year. And as I studied this further, I realized that it's a lot of job requirement. We don't have that many jobs available unless you create job creators. So if we want to address this problem of finding work for younger people, then job creators is the key piece that we need to fit in. And there's a couple of other very interesting statistics which were very shocking, but let me share a few ideas with you. So one important thing to note is that 98% of businesses in India are very tiny businesses, less than 10 employees. And actually, they remain very small for various structural reasons in India. Most other countries, there are lots of small businesses, but they are in the 60 to 70% range. In India, it's more than 95%. The second interesting reality is that 60% of non-farm jobs are actually happening in these small businesses, less than 10. So, no, even though we might say about automation, this, that, other things, industrialization, government, the jobs are really happening in the very small businesses. And the third thing that if you think about what is needed is that in India, if families make at least 30,000, 25,000 rupees and more per family, then they have a chance of getting into the upward spiral, which means that slowly they get off the poverty thing, they are well protected, they have insurance, whatever else, and one calamity doesn't take them out. If you're below that number, meaning below 15,000, 18,000, then you're not on the street per se, but you are susceptible to the first calamity to knock you out. So given this stuff, I have a foundation that I set up called Deyasra Foundation. And Deyasra comes from Anand Deshpande, and Deyasra are the initials of the family members, my wife and two kids. Wife Sonali, two kids is Riya and Arul. So that's the RA company. And we are focused on nano entrepreneurs. So how do you help nano entrepreneurs be successful? That's the mission. That's one part. And the other group I'm working on is which we call second orbit. So here I'm focused on businesses that are in the 15 to 20 crore range and trying to see how to help them to 10x their business. And here the premise is that businesses go through these S curves. So you do certain things, you see growth, and then you flatten it, and you have to find the next and the next. The transition from the first orbit to the second orbit is where the entrepreneur needs to retune and rewire himself. And it's very difficult for founders to make that transition. So a lot of businesses, especially in India, would tap out at 15, 20 crores. In the US, I'm told that number is between $6 and $8 million. So founders can start their business, 6, 8, $10 million, they can do on their own. But there aren't that many companies who will be able to get past that to hundreds of millions. So there is a little bit of a glass ceiling. And a lot of that has to do with the founder's mentality. I have another colleague, another ex-IIT Bombay person, gentleman called Ashok Porwal. So two of us have designed a program we call Second Orbit. And we are trying to see how to impact businesses that are in the zone which get stuck and see how to help them unshackle themselves in some sense to get to the second orbit. So these are the two big projects I'm working on the entrepreneurship side. So on the data side, I'm working on a bunch of tech projects. One is part of VLDB. So VLDB is a very large database conference that is held every year. I just felt that if I have to retire and do something else, if I'm not doing anything, quote unquote, intellectually stimulating, then I would feel like I would be missing something. So I decided that I should pick one activity and stick to it. So I go to VLDBs every year. It's a good way to stay in touch with the community. And I'm on the endowment right now. So I'm helping them with how do you create better industry academic partnerships and things. So I was in Vancouver for this conference last year and the one in Sydney as well. And then I've been quite active with ACM in India. ACM is Association of Computing Machinery. And I helped set up ACM in India. I was the first president of ACM India. And I'm quite actively involved. I believe that in India, we don't honor and value the techies as much as we should. So we're trying to see how to build a community of those. And then there are two interesting projects I'm working on. One is called ICGA Foundation, which is India Cancer Genome Atlas. So I got together with a bunch of cancer people, and there is something in the US called TCGA. Let me explain the premise of what I'm trying to do. So if you go to Indian doctors and Indian hospitals, they are quite up to date on the kinds of treatments that they need to offer to patients as compared to, let's say, a US hospital or whatever. So if you go to the reasonably good hospitals in India, let's say cancer or any of these things, they will know the treatments that are available anywhere in the world. The consequence of that means is that we are treating people on treatments that have been discovered and invented and built in the US. But they were built for US patients, not for Indian patients. So we don't have any Indian data. We don't have Indian protocols. We don't have any of our own data for our own people, for our own protocols, for our own treatments. So I'm trying to see how do we change that. So we got together with a bunch of cancer doctors and we have set up something called India Cancer Genome Atlas. And the idea is to build a data platform for people to have access to cancer data so that they can do research on finding cures for our people. Then I'm trying to do something similar in the context of diabetes and NCDs, non-communicable diseases. And so that's my second data bucket. And on the third bucket, I'm mainly focused on how do you help people learn on an ongoing basis? How do you get continuous learning to happen at large in the India context? Colleges, students, employees, and companies. And the reality on this is that all of us who've been to college and we're in college many years back, we all understand that the technology is moving so rapidly that whatever you learn in college is not going to last for more than a few years. So you have to rediscover yourselves on an ongoing basis. And that, having been in a company like Persistent, where I see thousands of employees and tens of thousands of employees, trying to help them stay abreast with new stuff, different things, is very hard. We are very tuned to this. You study for 25 years and then you do Grastashram for 25 years. So continuous learning is not built in our DNA. And that's something I'm trying to work on to see how do we create a. So three broad areas: entrepreneurship, data, and continuous education. I think these are problems that will last for my lifetime. I'm going to be gone a lot before these problems get solved. So I'm not going to run out of things to do, is how I see this. There is much to do. And good thing is, I'm in a nice situation in India at this moment. Having been here for the last 30, 35 years, I've built a good network of people I know. And I'm listening to a lot of people and trying to understand what these issues are and trying to see how we can do collaborative work to get this to happen. I don't do most of this myself. I'm listening to people. I set up calls, I listen to people, I bring two people from two different groups together and hear from them what their challenges are. And I'm on the data side, I'm still trying to assimilate how to convert these into a real meaningful project. On cancer, we have gone one step, but diabetes, I'm way behind. It's just good ways to keep myself very busy.
I can see you found a way to stay gainfully productive. This is great.
Gainfully productive is the right way. I've deliberately stayed away from consulting gigs or doing boards and such things. Really, I mean, I've been mostly on the non-profit side of things.
What you're doing makes a lot of sense. Also, the fact that most of the entrepreneurial ventures are tiny and they don't pass on generation to generation. Is it possible to create a system by which these small businesses either get absorbed into bigger businesses or have a way to, from the family business, pass on to something more professionally run so that there's continuity of jobs, continuity of growth rather than just die away with the founders?
I think dying away with the founders comes much later. What I find is that right now, young people, they are getting inspired to start businesses in large numbers as compared to previous years. But still, if you look at India right now, we need more job creators and entrepreneurs. So the way I see this is that, if people feel we need role models. You need people who showcase that, a guy from your community, he went and started a tailoring shop and made enough money for himself and for his family, and he can keep doing this. And he feels confident to hire 5 people to work for him. And so on, right? So that cycle is a very virtuous cycle. And that's really what the goal at the moment for me is. Meaning, I think getting them through the generation to the next generation is a little bit of a longer term thing. I think it'd be important to do that, but I would believe that people will do it. Either kids will only join their father's business if they see real value for themselves. So the first thing is to get people to create these businesses that are valuable for themselves. They are running professionally. They're getting credit from when they need it. They're able to grow when they want to grow, and they're adequately well set up. And in India right now, we have identified a whole set of issues that these very small, we call them nano entrepreneurs. And it's not easy to run a small business in India.
You spoke about cancer, and cancer correlates highly with inflammation, and you are absolutely right. The causes of inflammation are different in different regions, stress
Yeah.
being a major factor. Have you so far identified what causes cancer?
No, I'm not that close to any of those things. See, I'll tell you what I hear from my cancer friends. They say that Indian cancers, and I have a few people I work with or my friends who are working in breast cancer. And so let me just stay to that and I'll tell you what is different. So apparently in the US, most breast cancer happens in women over 50. In India, the number of women under 40 who get breast cancer is alarmingly high, much higher than in any other country. So clearly, there is something happening here where younger women are getting cancers in India. Also, when you're trying to test, which is a standard protocol, they say, okay, you do mammograms once in a few years after the age of 45, 50. For the US, that makes sense. But if you're going to have cancers below 30, below 40, then if you don't test till then, how will you ever find out, right? So, and dense breast mammograms don't work all that. Now, other interesting and sad fact is that of those women under 40 who get cancer, a very high incidence of them happen to be triple negative breast cancers, as they say. And triple negative breast cancers, the treatment outcomes are not that great. And again, there aren't that many triple negative breast cancer patients in North America as they are in India. So clearly, there are certain differences like that where if we could find our own data set, then we would be able to answer questions more interestingly. I'll give you one other story, which is slightly different, but this is from the diabetes side of conversations I've had with certain people. I spoke to a lady. She's a professor in biotechnology at IIT Jodhpur. And she said that she has studied pets, cats, dogs, and other things. And she finds that cats, dogs, and pets in Rajasthan have higher HbA1c, meaning glucose levels, as compared to cats, dogs in other parts of India. Okay, now this is fact. This is what she has observed. It's her observation. And her point is it probably is the case because the quality of water and the salt content and the kind of vegetation they have means that these pets have to adapt to higher glucose sugars. But this is observation so far. Now the question is, do these cats and dogs live less because they have higher blood sugar in Rajasthan as compared to other parts of the country? Or is the fact that they live the same, but nature has adapted that they need to have higher blood glucose sugar? Now, if they move from Rajasthan to some other region, should it come down or should it stay? What is the correlation? Is this true for humans? So, these kinds of data questions are very hard for us to answer because we don't have any data at this level. We can't answer these questions. So, point is, can we find partners, collaborators to somehow create a platform so that these kinds of questions can be asked? And for us Indians, which is now say 1/5 of the world population nearly, we need to not be dependent on some studies in Norway or some Sweden or whatever else and assume that that's going to work for everyone in India as well because we are so different, right? We eat different kinds of food, we have different kinds of surroundings, our pollution and environmental situations are quite different. Food diets, a big part of what happens, right? Very different here in India as compared to other parts of the world. And genetically also there are differences. So it is important that we find research and focus on research and data analysis. So these are all long-term problems. I would not claim I'm anywhere near any solution at the moment. I'm just trying to build an ecosystem at the moment. I'm going to give myself a few more years. And once we get to a point where people agree that there is value in collaboration, then it'll have the right impact. But at least I'm thinking about these problems.
Yeah, absolutely true. And diabetes is another of those lifestyle diseases, which is growing at an alarming rate, particularly among the urban, well off people, too. It's not
Yes,
just an
absolutely.
affliction of the poor. And diabetes also highly correlates with lifestyle, in addition to the genetic correlates. So, any such effort will be very valuable.
Also, look at treatments. If somebody with a high blood pressure or some high blood sugar goes to the doctor in the US, depending on their ethnicity, black women versus white males, you'll get very different kinds of treatment because there is evidence and data that says certain things work for certain kinds of people. We don't have that level of sophistication of stratification of our data sets, understanding of how we need to work. Is it regional? Is it whatever? So I think this level of national data sets have not been created in India. And there are many reasons why this is the problem. So this is something that I'm trying to find out. So how do we try to address this problem? So it's not getting two people to work together, but trying to think through this a little bit more.
You mentioned that the Indian economy now is far more technologically driven. With the changing automation levels in software development, in fact, going more and more towards low code, no code, and highly automated systems, that's going to put pressure in terms of the quality and style of software development and the kind of jobs we create in India. What are your thoughts on that?
Mhm. So let me segment this problem into two parts. So let me first focus on the leveraging of technology in India. The whole Aadhaar, UPI, and many other such initiatives that have come in India have really made cell phone a really powerful tool for everyone, including the very poor. So the amount of UPI, QR code scanning, direct money to money transfers is going at a very nice level. And I had a nice privilege of being part of some of these ecosystems. I spent 6 years on the board of UID Authority of India, which is where the Aadhaar project was running. My term was from 2016 to 22. So the 2 3 year terms I did. So I had a good chance to see the impact and the challenges that people face and what we can do with Aadhaar mainly. So UID Authority of India gives you yes, no on the other thing. And it has been transformational in terms of how money is moving in India right now. The healthcare transformation, I think, is imminent. The attempts that are being made at grand scale to try to see how to provide basic health insurance to the poor is starting to happen. And slowly and steadily, if you look at India, there is like three Indias in some sense. So there's the affluent India, which can travel to the US if they need to, and they're all well off. And the very poor India is quite poor, and the middle India is the aspiring India. The middle India is also very large in terms of the numbers. So, almost if you say 40% of India, 5% is the top, and then next 35 to 40% is the aspiring India, which is 1.4 billion people. It's a very large number. So that number is where the market is hitting. But there's a 45% India, which is really operating at less than 15,000 rupees a month as a family income. And they need a whole bunch of protection and all of that. So I see that food security and health security are two main things that people are starting to focus on. And I think technology is starting to play a big role in both of these areas. So I'm very upbeat about some of these things coming into India, and cell phone and all the other things have really made a difference. I think AI will also start to bring in very interesting changes in education. We have a huge deficit. Healthcare, we have a big deficit of medical doctors. So can we help on triaging early patients, making a whole bunch of things happen? So a doctor, can he become more efficient by having bots to work with him? Because you just don't have that many doctors. Telemedicine and variations on that starting to become very interesting. So I think health and education and the language related issues are starting to really make a huge difference. I know a lot of projects going on in here about how to get some of these technologies to happen in these areas. So I'm very upbeat on AI also starting to play a role in the Indian ecosystem. Let me shift to the programmer side of things, which is where I make my money, if you might want to say that. So clearly, as programmers, we are all very confused about what AI can do for us. All of us who have been using technology have observed that if you ask the right set of things and all that, it's like having 15, 20 interns working for you. You can run 5 different things at the same time and run them so fast and you get so many results back. So programmers have become super programmers at the moment. So that's great. I mean, you can do a lot more. So the question is, can you sell enough so that enough people have to, all the superpowers and super programmers that you have created, will they have enough work to do? And that's a genuine concern. I see the world into 3 tiers. The top guys typically are going to become super, super efficient. They're going to become very good. They know what to ask. They know how to ask. When they get responses back, they know how to go back or ask for more and things like that. So I see the programmers in the company, the super programmers, have become really, really good. The bottom guys now, more people can be at the bottom because anybody and everybody can do data analysis, this, that, and other things. So as people are starting to become prompt engineers, you will see more and more people. At least language tools, I start to see a lot of people using them already, meaning improving your text and stories and give me this and that. So that's starting to happen. So bottom is it. But programmers who are the middle, who have been doing QA, who have been doing test data generation, who have been writing low code, not deep, but just kind of superficial programs. There are lots of them in India. I think life is not that easy for them in the future because all those jobs are going to get cannibalized. So the race is right now is to get more and more people to get to the top and people who stay in the middle, it is going to be a very difficult.
When people come to you saying, where should I focus my career? And especially if they're in the software arena, what advice do you give them? What's the best approach or attitude somebody should have to get into these areas today?
My first book at all, if I write, will be on this topic. And I'll give you the framework very briefly. What I tell people is you can assume a 40-year career. You start at early 20s, you work for 10, 20, 30 till your early 60s. So that's sort of your 40-year career. So I recommend to people to take your 40-year career and divide it into 4 10-year segments. First decade, the second decade, third decade, and the fourth decade. And then I tell people in the first decade, your objective should be to learn and network. The second decade, you must focus on becoming an expert at something. Who decides that you are an expert is a good question. But you have to define at what level of expert you are. But there is no value for a 20-year generalist and 20 years of experience. I should be able to tell what am I good at and what has that 20 done for me, and hence I can be useful to someone, rather than say that I have 20 years of experience. So by the time you complete 20 years of experience, you should have expertise in something. In the third decade, I tell people most corner office jobs go to people in their early 50s. So you're in your early 40s, in your third decade, you have to know where your endpoint is first, and you work your way to the endpoint. And I claim that between, say, 42 and 52, which is when you should get your corner office, you have no more than 3 steps. Early 40s is the time when you redefine your corner office. So you ensure that you have no more than 3 steps to get to it. The highest level of frustration amongst career jobs happens in the mid 40s, is my theory. And till mid 40s, you believe that you can achieve whatever you want to do. And when the pyramid starts to taper down very drastically after that point, people realize that they may not get the corner office they thought was always there. And that causes a lot of grief and difficulty, right? So that's sort of where the third decade is. And the fourth decade, you have to mentor, learn how to delegate, work with other people. You're now the leader in the corner office. And the job of the corner office is to get other people to do the work, not so much do it yourself. Right? So how do you build teams? How do you work with that? And then you have to set yourselves up for retirement, because by the time you're early 60s, you'll be done with your professional paid career, but you still have another 10, 15 years to go, right? So you have to set yourselves up so that you have things to do after that, which is what I mentioned to you. Because I crossed that threshold recently. So I had to make sure I have things to do for beyond 60. Otherwise, beyond a point, you can't just push yourself in the company, right?
I think just like we have sweet 16 parties, it's time to have sweet 60 parties now, right?
Yeah, we do, right? Out here, and at least in India, 60 is a big deal, and there's a big puja and all that stuff that you're supposed to do. From where I'm sitting in India, if you let people retire at 60, then that gives chance who are younger to do the jobs also. If people who, beyond a point, should not hold on to block. You are blocking organizations.
Speaking of education, and you've done a lot of research on this, one of the things that made me sad was that less than 8% of the population has college degrees. How important are college degrees, number one? And number two, what kind of post high school education do you think will be helpful to create a stronger, even more vibrant economy and productive lives for people?
I think very good question. Colleges are important because it helps young people between the age of, let's say, 16 to 22, who they hang out with, has a very high correlation to where they will end up. So colleges are a good place to hang out rather than hanging out anywhere else, right? So to that extent, kids at that age hanging out together amongst cohorts, groups which are intense, motivated, energized, colleges can really do that role very well. Good outcomes happen by people who hang out with good students in good colleges. So I think it's important to make that happen. That said, I really believe that as we move ahead, jobs are not going to depend only on degrees. They're going to depend a lot more on skills than they're going to depend on degrees. And that's a very tricky problem in a way, right? Meaning, if we say they're not dependent on degrees and colleges are only focused on degrees, what happens to skills, and are skills different from degrees? So we need to find ways to help people acquire skills for a lifetime and keep acquiring skills on an ongoing basis. So I think this is where our system has not been as good. is that we tend to focus a lot more as college being between 18 and 22. And we are not so open to continuous education and people going back to college. That's not that common in India. It's much more so in the US. Or you'll see a lot more people doing evening classes and other classes in the US than you see. And then that needs to change. I also believe that we are heading into a world where we are going to see more and more of a gig economy world. Right? So people doing multiple jobs at the same time. You do a job, meaning a gig, and then you find the next one. So these are really skills. And so one of the things that I'm doing as part of the Asra Foundation is we run a course for BA, BCom, BSc. So not the tech professional, but non-professional degrees. We teach how to manage your money, how to sell. Because in the gig economy, I think that people are going to get paid actually decent amount of money, but they'll not get paid regularly. So if you're going to get paid sporadically, you need to understand how to save, what is insurance, what does return mean, what does investment mean, and all that. A lot of these kids, especially in these kinds of colleges, they're going to earn more than their parents. They need to understand how their cash flow is going to work and how they should, when is a good time to buy a house and when not to buy a house, how much do you spend on a house. So we have a pretty nice program that we have set up on helping people learn how to manage money. And the other program that we are running is how to sell, because I believe that once your gig ends, you find the next gig, you have to sell your next gig. In India, especially, I find that people have this attitude, we don't do sales. And it's like, come on, the real money is made by people who know how to sell. And I feel that I'm a sales guy and I'm really proud of being a salesman. And I think everyone should feel honored to be a salesman. It is the most important skill. And somehow we look down on salespeople. It's the sales engine that drives the business. People should be very excited about joining the sales team. We get the best engineers here, and if you tell them, why don't you join the sales team, they'll give you 100 reasons why. This needs to change.
I changed from engineering into marketing when my investors actually told me, you have a choice. You move into marketing, then we'll give you the funding. Because they said, you're a good storyteller. Why are you wasting your life coding? It was a hard transition, but I'm very
Correct.
grateful to Suhas Patel and many others who insisted that I make that transition. So,
No,
well,
absolutely. It's true, and I think it's important that we let people understand the importance of being a salesman. And in any job, even if you're doing R&D, you need to sell your project, you need to sell your specifications, you need to sell your team, you need to sell people to join your team. All these things are necessary. So there's no point in trying to ignore the white elephant, right? Meaning you might as well accept it and be them. And I find that the BA BCom students, right, they are very hungry. They're looking for things to do. I'm not going to the engineering schools yet because they have a career, they feel they're going to get the jobs and they would much rather learn machine learning.
thanks, Anand, for a very candid, honest interview. That's exactly what I look forward to. And to everybody listening out there, we need to understand what's going on. It's not only technology, but how it's changing our lives, our societies, our communities. And it's not all the US, the world is changing and in very different ways. So please come forward. I want to know your stories. I want to know how it's affecting your neighborhoods, the regions where you live in, work in, so we can together understand what's going on and hopefully build a more meaningful world, a world where everybody gets a chance to come forward and work together. So, Anand, again, thanks a lot. I truly appreciate what you've been to not only me as a bystander who looked at all the things you're doing, but to many people who you directly influenced. Thanks again.
No, thank you, Shankar, for inviting me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be on your podcast. And I hope to see you in India and perhaps in the Bay Area sometime soon.